Hello and welcome to the Ancestral Healing with Herbs webinar. This is the third webinar, and as you can see behind me and above me are all the herbs from the garden. It's been quite spring and early summer. The herbs are in the garden and I just went on a walk up the hill where there are wild herbs growing that I work with often that I'll share about too. And I just picked a bunch of these herbs. And then of course the garden, I picked some herbs from there today too. But as you can see, the whole house, I've run out of spaces to hang herbs in the house. And this feels like just having herbs hanging all around the house and always finding herbs when you go out on a walk and bringing them home. That alone feels like an ancestral healing to me. And so for me, this topic of ancestral healing, it starts with the simple interactions with herbs that we have on a day-to-day basis, and recognizing that our ancestors have gathered herbs and had relationships with plants and gone through the process of learning how to relate to the plants, how to care for the plants, how the plants are caring for us, learning the effects that any given plant might have on our systems, listening to our bodies and listening to the wisdom that's offered by the plants that our ancestors, since ancient times, the wise women ancestors in our lineage have that experience, and it carries forward in our cells, in our DNA. And that we can access that through very simple methods. So today and yesterday, and it's been a spring like this, being with the plants, going outside in the garden, going out for a walk in nature, and discovering a plant that you either know something about or would like to learn more about and feel drawn to exploring. Whatever your relationship with that plant, whether new or established, having a greeting moment, saying hello to the plant, either silently inside or outwardly with your voice, is the first step. These are our friends, these are our allies. So, having social norms, treating the plant like a living being that is there with wisdom for us, and greeting it with joy and happy to see you, and then, like for me today, so I'll talk about this wonderful friend. I have been relating to this plant. It grows on a hill. There's a little nature preserve that has the water tower for my little town. It's called Rabbit Hill, and it's just a half a block from me, and I walk up there. It's a nice 10-minute walk. I get a little cardio because it's a bit of a hill, and there's a path that goes up one side and then down the other side, and I go up one side, down the other side, then back up and come back down. And I do this very regularly, and it has a lovely view of the town once I'm at the top. And all along, up and down the side, this plant grows. So this is Yerba Santa, which in Spanish means saintly herb. And it grows wild here in California. It's very dry here. This herb is dependent on fire for its procreation. So you can see there's some seed pods here that we're starting to develop. The seeds, it drops a lot of seeds every year, but they don't sprout every year. They sprout after a fire. So before the big fires 4 years ago that burned this hillside, the yerba santa was there, but it had been 10 years or more. It hadn't burned in many, many years, and it was we were having long periods of drought, 10 years worth of drought. And so the yerba santa had, the leaves were like much smaller than this. Like you can see, this leaf is almost as long as my hand. The leaves on the pre-fire yerba santa were more like this one, barely as long as my finger. They were covered in brown spots. As you can see, this whole batch that I have, no spots at all. Shiny, green, lovely herbs, leaves, and they were just languishing there. They hardly had any leaves. They weren't very bushy. It would be a tiny, a leafless stalk with a few leaves at the top. It would just be each year putting out as many flowers and seeds as it possibly could before it got too dry in the summer, and just languishing along. After the fire, it came up with huge leaves. The new sprouts came up with leaves bigger than my foot. And I remember taking pictures. And so I've had this relationship with this herb across its life cycle over the course of these last number of years since I've been living in this area, and even from before then, because I lived here before. And that relationship with a plant over time, noticing how the seasons affect it and the changes in the seasons, the drought, the fire, and all of that, I've gotten to know this herb. And every year, except when it was really languishing, I didn't harvest very much when it was really suffering from the drought. But since the drought, and especially since the fire, it's gotten super bushy. It's covering the whole hillside because all the seeds that had been dropped and hadn't sprouted, then sprouted after the fire. So the whole hillside is covered with this. So I'll only harvest wild herbs if it's abundant, okay, because I don't want to diminish the population. So as we're relating with the plants as friends and allies, it awakens this caretaking in us. And our ancestors and the ancestors of this land have caretaken these herbs. Now, yerba santa is called yerba santa for a reason. Why is it called the saintly herb? So this is something that I explore and look to. You don't find this herb in many books. I have a feeling that this herb was used by, I know that it was used by the Native American people for all kinds of healing. I know it's related to the lungs. It's used in smoking blends. I've gathered little bits and pieces of information. I've used it in healing teas for the community when we have a lot of smoke inhalation during the fire season, so our lungs are compromised. And I feel like it's much more than just a lung herb. There's all this information that I'm gathering, but it's a bit of a mystery, and I feel like it has a connection to the ancestors of the land here. So there's two types of ancestry. There's our blood lineage that we can access, and then there's the ancestry of the land where you're living. And you can access that through that ancestry, through the plants too, and that wisdom and that healing that needs to happen by looking at our relationship to the land and to the people that that lived here over the years, the history of this land and the people here. So the herbs can help us with that. Now, yerba santa is particularly good for smudging. It's a very dry herb, and especially now that it hasn't been raining for a while, I can make, and my plan is to make smudge sticks. And burning herbs for smoke and for smudging, ceremonial smoke, is one of the ways that people have used the herbs for healing purposes since the beginning of time. And aromatic smoke releases the healing properties of the herbs. We breathe it in, we get it on our skin, and it has very powerful healing properties. I also feel like, and we've seen in traditions, spiritual traditions around the world, that burning aromatics for aromatic smoke in the form of incense, smudging, whatever it may be, it is used in spiritual ceremony to communicate with and make offerings to those in other realms. Okay, so burning herbs for smoke is a way to access divine or spirit realms, ancestral realms. So across traditions around the world, burning herbs for smoke is a way to make smoke, is a way to cross the veil and be able to cross the veil between the worlds and be able to communicate with spirit beings and access ancestral wisdom, divine wisdom, and like that. So yerba santa, just in the name, the saintly herb, it probably got that name because in California, through colonization, a lot of the colonization of the Native American peoples here happened through the Catholic Church. And a lot of the Native American traditions were recorded by the Catholic Church and taken ownership of, or sort of subjugated and taken over by the Catholic Church. So any herbal lore or wisdom that the Native American people retained or had that was useful, that was helpful, the Catholic Church then renamed, and it was in Spanish at first, because, as you may know, California was part of Mexico before it was purchased by the United States. And so it was Spanish priests. That's why all the names of places and missions and all of this are in Spanish. And so they named yerba santa the saintly herb for a reason. Okay, it was a healing herb that was probably used in all kinds of ways. And so my intention with this yerba santa, as part of this ancestral healing process that I'm going through of learning, remembering, and sharing as I go, more and more about how to access our ancestral wisdom and support our ancestral healing processes with herbs, is to create some smudge sticks with this yerba santa, and then use it for smudging and ancestral wisdom accessing practices that I share about in my course, the Ancestral Healing with Herbs course. That's part of the Womb Centered Healing Temple membership. So if you're interested in diving deeper into these practices, I'm compiling series of practices to use the herbs to receive, not use, I don't like calling it using, but to receive the medicine, all the different ways that we can practice receiving the medicine that the herbs are offering us. And smudging is one of the ways, and Yerba Santa is one of the herbs that makes wonderful smudge options. And I feel like it will, because it grows here, it is going to nourish and open my ability to receive the wisdom of the ancestry here, and the information about that, and guidance from the ancestry from this land. And it will also awaken my own ancestral wisdom that is relevant to my healing process living here on this land. I have lots of ancestry, blood ancestry, that traveled all around and learned to adapt to different climates, different environments, different circumstances, and change and growth. And so activating that strength in my ancestry is one of the gifts of that receiving medicine from these herbs can strengthen and fortify for me, and for you as well. And so smudging, is something that if we're in ceremonial practices or groups or healing processes with practitioners, we can often take the smudging for granted and not recognize how important it is for our ancestral healing. And that's one of the things in this webinar that I keep feeling called to talk about, is that the smudging creates a powerful portal. That use of smoke, just doing it itself, creates awakens our genetic memory of the thousands and thousands of generations that have received herbal medicine in this way. And it also opens a portal into the spirit realm, makes an offering, offers the smoke, the energy of the herb, of that medicine, to the ancestors. And then evokes certain qualities of wisdom and listening and meditative states. And each herb that you might smudge with might evoke a different quality. So the Yerba Santa, for me, feels like it will deepen this connection with the ancestral spirits of this land where I'm living, and help me in the ways that I described. I also have made smudge sticks with rosemary, which grows wild in my blood lineage's ancestral lands in Italy. And rosemary is also well known for its ability to assist in memory, and it's used in various ways for that I share more about in the course. And so it feels like the rosemary is assisting with that memory and connection with my blood lineage ancestry. Another one that I receive wonderful medicine from, and this is the flowering parts. I wouldn't make smudge sticks with this, but I might add it, dry it and add it to an incense. This is white sage, and it grows wild here as well, although not so much as far north as I am in California. It's mostly farther south, but because I do live in a place and in my garden, it's very happy here. Even though it does rain here more and have cooler winters here than where it's native habitat, that's changing, and the white sage is very happy here. So it is also a wonderful smudging herb or incense herb. You know, these branches of the plant in my garden, they just sort of fall off with the weight, the tall weight of their um, flowering stalks. And so I bring them in and hang them to dry, and then pick off the dried leaves and use those in. It smells so wonderful. And so the sage, the white sage, has a similar quality to the yerba santa in connecting me with the ancestral lineage of the land here where I live. And it also has, it's just two unique things. So I'm going to explore more with both of these herbs, smudging and putting them in incense, and seeing what different medicine comes from each herb. And I might feel called to receive different medicine for different times, and different times that I feel that ancestral pull or call to healing. So how do we feel ancestral call to healing? So well, before I get into that, I also wanted to talk a little bit about other herbs that you might find wild. That one in particular that Claire mentioned in the chat is that she's been harvesting St. John's wort, and that's also one that I harvest as well, that grows wild around here as well. It's growing wild in my neighbor's yard, and my landlord knows not to weed whack it. Um, my neighbor, I live in an apartment complex, so he comes and weed whacks the whole thing, my neighbor's yard and my yard, and he and I have an agreement because he knows I have a relationship with this herb, and bless him, he recognizes that, and we have a relationship. He protects those herbs, the St. John's wort, and doesn't cut them, and weed whacks everything else. Such a blessing. And so, and it also grows wild in all kinds of places. There's a creek walk that I go on, although I didn't see much there this year, but there's another trail that I go walking on that usually has a lot. But the ones in my yard are so abundant that I gather as much as I need from my yard. And St. John's wort is a particular herb that's very good for the nervous system. It helps with depression and regenerating damaged nerves. So it has a very specific medicine that it brings to our nervous system. And so this brings us, the different qualities of the different herbs bring us to, okay, the question of what herb is good for this physical ailment, or what herb is good for that physical ailment. And there was a question that came up at the beginning before we started the recording about a particular ailment of blood pressure, low blood pressure or high blood pressure. So, and what I was sharing then is that it's not really the context of this webinar to say, oh, this herb is good for that particular ailment, and give specific herbal advice for specific physical ailments. It's really requires a bit more than that, than just doling out herbal prescriptions on a group webinar. But what we can look at in this webinar is how illnesses or health issues like that can be signals for us to look at our ancestral healing process and to draw us in to learning more about our ancestry. And so we know that many ailments, like the low or high blood pressure, for example, or for me, thyroid, which can sometimes be connected to low or high blood pressure, or womb ailments that can be, you know, challenges with fertility, painful menstruation, a whole long list of womb ailments, or nervous system ailments, depression, or nerve pain, uh, inflammation in the joints, and pain from injury, nerve pain. Um, all of these, any physical symptom can be a doorway in to ancestral healing. So for the examples that we have that we were discussing today, the low blood pressure, for example. So how our heart pumps blood through our system. So low blood pressure may be for many different reasons. It might be that the heart isn't pumping as vigorously or as quickly, or it may be that the vascular tone is a little bit slack, and so the blood isn't getting enough pressure built up. You know, it's like, so pressure works like if you imagine a garden hose, and it's just flowing out softly. But say you want more pressure to get it to go farther, like you want to spray across the yard because the hose doesn't reach over there and you want to water something. If you constrict the hole, you give it the smaller hole to go through, then it will have more pressure and it will shoot farther. So low blood pressure can be problematic because your blood might not be able to get all the way out to your extremities. And it may not, part of what may be causing the blood pressure is if your veins are a little too soft, perhaps. Your arteries are a little too soft, your heart's not pumping hard enough, and your blood isn't getting where it needs to go. And so as we start to look at what's really going on when you have a condition like, for example, low blood pressure, you can start to look at that symbolically. Okay, what does the blood mean symbolically? The blood is our vitality. We talk about our ancestry as our blood lineage. Okay, we got our blood from our mother, and our mother got her blood from her mother, and we pass this blood down through the generations. And so if our blood isn't getting to where it needs to go, if our heart isn't pumping our blood as strongly as it needs to, our blood can't feed us, nourish our life. And perhaps our blood needs to be nourished. Perhaps our blood is needing to be held more strongly and attended to. Okay, so these are just some reflections about how ancestral healing, how a physical ailment or health issue can become a doorway, a portal into ancestral healing. And so herbs like the ones I've been talking about today that help us to connect with that ancestral wisdom can be very helpful in this initial inquiry of saying, okay, I have this health issue, I'm going to smudge, say with rosemary to help me remember what ancestral healing process this is related to. Say with yerba santa, the saintly herb, perhaps yerba santa helps us access not only our ancestral lineage and the spirits in our ancestral realm, but perhaps divine energies as well. Perhaps the yerba santa helps us to connect with angelic energies or divine beings as well. Maybe that's why it was called yerba santa. So asking the herb to help us to receive that wisdom and healing energy from the spirit realm. And that's one way that the herbs can help us, to help us remember and connect with whatever ancestral lineage healing process we're being called to engage in by whatever health issue is going on for us right now. And then specific herbs can help with that healing process of whatever it is, the low or high blood pressure, for example, or the depression, say, or the nerve pain from an injury, in various ways. But this is one of the reasons why I don't just give out, oh, this herb is good for that and that herb is good for that, because there's a whole system. Our bodies are a whole system that is also intertwined and completely unified with our emotional body and our spirit body. And the plants are living beings as well and have an emotional and spirit body too. It's a little different than our human emotional and spirit body, different species altogether. And yet it's connected. The plants guide us to connect with the earth energies, the spirit earth energies, and the cosmic energies, and guide us and help us to remember how to do that. And then hold specific medicine, just as we do, to support various organ systems. And so to see, for example, for myself, if I have low blood pressure or high blood pressure, I would want to have a practitioner. I have my acupuncturist or my vaginal steam consultant. We would look over all of my health symptoms and practices and how I care for myself, and create a holistic plan, choosing partly intuitively, but also partly from the wealth of knowledge that we've gathered and that we're remembering, and perhaps asking the spirit realms for assistance in choosing a specific constellation of herbal remedies that will support me in that healing process, including the ancestral component. So for me, high blood pressure is an issue in my family, as well as low blood pressure. So the low blood pressure comes from thyroid deficiency, and the high blood pressure comes from the heart just being, and it's like an emotional, spiritual thing. So my grandmother has high blood pressure, and it's very clear that it comes from this attitude of, just if you have an emotional thing, just carry on, just push it aside, stuff it down. It's, it's not worth wasting time on talking about it or spending much time with it. There's things to do in life. Get on with it. Okay, so that attitude has stuffed down lifetimes, not only hers, but past life, ancestral lifetimes of traumas and emotions that there was never time to address because there were things to do to get on with, right? And that increases the pressure, because those hidden, stuffed down emotions and traumas that were never addressed are like trying to be addressed. And so that increases the pressure and the reactivity, emotional reactivity, because you're full up to here of unresolved, unfelt emotions, and then any little thing sets you off. And so that's involved with the nervous system as well. And so that, unfortunately, my grandmother is she's just not really interested in doing any kind of depth of healing because she totally believes and buys into that whole process. However, I can see that and know that about her and know my ancestry, my blood ancestry, and know that tendency and know that when that pattern comes up in me, that, oh, this is an ancestral pattern. And let me see what herbs do I need for my tendency towards having blood pressure things, knowing what the choices I've made in my life to not do it that way. And then that's a different constellation of herbs because of my lifestyle, my whole life story, than would be for my grandmother, you know. And so, and then of course, herbs also include the foods we eat, the plants that we eat, so food medicine is also involved in ancestral healing. So as I heal my blood pressure, whether it's the low blood pressure from the thyroid or the high blood pressure from getting too busy with life and not attending to, leaving plenty of space and time and support to tend to whatever emotional things are going on. As I heal that gets passed back through my ancestry and forward to the descendants, even if I don't have children. Those who come later, especially if I've written a book or shared information in my process online, or just that energy of me healing then gets passed down and builds up what's available for people to come. And so just me doing my healing then sends that healing through the ancestral lineage, especially if I have that intention, if I include that intention, and especially if I'm using smudging herbs that open that portal to the spirit realm. And I'm attending to all aspects of healing. I'm not just focusing on the physical, mechanical aspect, but also having a holistic approach of including meditations and visualizations and energy practices and spiritual practices that are in alignment with the healing process that I am wanting to undergo, whatever physical health issue. So as we start to see the health issue like the blood pressure as a symbolic thing, then that gives us clues, and we start to look at our lineage of that physical ailment and how it's changed from the different lifestyle changes, and change our own lifestyles. And the thing is, our bodies and our wombs draw us into a sustainable lifestyle. So one of the biggest things that I talk with my clients about is what aspect of how you're living your life is of how you're living your life is perpetuating this illness or this pain that you're experiencing. So, for example, my grandmother and my whole lineage, getting things done, not taking time to address trauma or emotional stuff, that's not worth your time. Well, that habit pattern has been going back through the generations, has been going on through the generations, and it can be tough to break. It's a go-to. It was a healthy coping mechanism. It served a certain purpose. It wasn't necessarily healthy in all circumstances, but it served a certain purpose, and it was a positive purpose. And yet it was imbalanced and has been at the root of some of the health issues, like particularly what my grandmother's dealing with now. Her high blood pressure is has started to produce mini strokes, and that's a form of dementia where your blood pressure is such that it bursts little blood vessels in your brain, which then kills off brain cells and diminishes brain function. So that's one form of dementia. So my grandmother's capacities to function in life are now, her high blood pressure, that whole pattern is no longer healthy for her. And so, you know, these ailments that we carry, if we don't address them and find a healthier, more sustainable way when the health ailment is small and not very debilitating, then they will continue, that health issue will continue to grow and get worse and worse and worse as we get older. And that's what produces a lot of the things that people struggle with, health issues that people struggle with as they get older. And so that's why this holistic approach that includes the ancestral healing component with the herbs, where herbs will give us the nutrients, and having a specific constellation or recipe of herbs that we receive the medicine of each day is so important. It's a very nourishing herbs. All right, so let's see. Heather is saying thank you. Yes, ancestral healing is a huge part of this. And you're wondering what happened in your line if at 49 you never gave birth to a child. Interesting, I'm going to be 49 this year as well, and I never gave birth to a child as well. And for me, it was a deliberate choice. I don't know what it was for the person making this comment, but for me, it was a deliberate choice because I knew in my lineage, from the way that I was raised and everything that happened to me as a child, I needed to focus on my healing because I refused to perpetuate the pain and suffering in the way that my parents raised me. I didn't, and I knew that I would repeat it. Well, it made me incapable of having a relationship in all kinds of ways, and that's a whole nother story. But that lineage is of, you know, how we were raised and how our parents were raised and how they were raised, our parents' parents were raised, and everything that went on completely formulates who we are and how we live our lives, and all the opportunities that are available to us rest on that foundation. And so healing, real healing that really makes a change, I feel, has to involve ancestral healing. Because if we're really going to heal on all levels and change, make real change that is sustaining, that's self-sustaining, we have to change at a DNA level, at a deep level, and that comes from our ancestry. And, you know, a lot of people talk about genetic ailments that you inherited as though that's it, that's the end of the story. When genetics and how our genes express themselves in our bodies is just as much influenced by the environment that we're in, the environmental influences, as any hardwired genetic structure. And that hardwired genetic structure, science is finding actually that it's not as hardwired as we thought, that the genetic structure is actually greatly influenced by environmental circumstances. So as we put ourselves into more and more healing circumstances and receive the medicine that Mother Earth is giving us, and allow that to influence us at a deep genetic level, especially through womb healing, because womb healing activates our ability to connect with that genetic healing capacity of our bodies. And with that ancestral lineage, we can shift these kinds of genetic hereditary ailments. Okay. Okay, so talking about here, another in the comment, uh, the person who was commenting about not having a child at 49, like me, for her, it was not a choice. And there is, yes, that given what's happening with her and her parents, and um, it's very clear to her that ancestry work is an enormous part of her path, and perhaps she might be able to have a child once she clears some of this, or creates a different environment. And that's the thing, is if we're really going to do ancestral healing, my experience is we need to change everything about our lives. Every aspect of our lives is being run by that patterning in our DNA, in our genes that we inherited. And so ancestral healing then requires us to look at how we're spending our day-to-day lives, how we're nourishing ourselves, what we're thinking, what we're believing in, and really look at where all of that comes from. Did we inherit that? Are we eating what we're eating because that's what we learned how to eat from our family? What part of that is healthy and what part of that isn't so healthy? And then, of course, in the ancestral healing with herbs, what herbs are available to us from where we live, what grows wild, but also why does it grow wild there? Was it always there, or was it brought by some ancestors? What herbs are in our kitchen? What do we cook with? Why? Who taught us to cook that way? To use which herbs in our cooking, or teas, herbal teas to drink for healing? Perhaps there's ancestral wisdom that's been passed down that we can consciously engage with and inquire more about and receive more from by that conscious engagement. And perhaps there are lifestyle habits that aren't so healthy that could stand to be questioned. And so, and especially when we're going through processes of, like, several of my clients lately have been, and it's coming up for me too, that as our parents or our grandparents are getting ready to pass on, there's a role reversal that naturally happens where the child then becomes the caretaker. Well, I was kind of the caretaker all along in my childhood, which is very common. But then when the parent is passing on and is dealing with the consequences of their lifestyle, whatever those were, with whatever ailments they had coming from things that they didn't receive healing and it got too far along that now it's crisis, or it's compromising their health, or uh, getting to be the end of their life because of it, like is the case with my grandmother. Then there's this natural role reversal where we're caring for them, and that can be very challenging and very confronting of this ancestral healing process. So the challenge for me in that circumstance with my grandmother is to not abandon my own healing process and what I need to live a sustainable lifestyle to fulfill this duty of caring for her. And I'm supporting my mother with that process too, because she's more directly caring for my grandmother. But my grandmother has asked certain things of me, and I'm having to watch myself with the tendency of saying, oh, forget all of my healing processes. I'm just going to go and do that for my grandmother. And that doesn't help anyone. And so remembering to listen to what's sustainable for my body and my healing process is really important in that. And the herbs really help with that too. Especially the nervine herbs help to nourish a healthy way of seeing things and thinking about things and making decisions and keeping us from out of fight and flight mode, because that's when we start to perpetuate unhealthy patterns, is when we're in crisis mode all the time. And that's that high blood pressure too. Everything's a crisis, right? So St. John's wort is very helpful for that as well. So I've been talking and talking and talking, and our time is just about up here for the webinar. So I really encourage your questions in the Mighty Network Womb-Centered Healing Temple group, as well as if you're still in the Facebook group, I'm happy to talk with you there, but the recording will be in the Mighty Networks group. If you want to dive more into ancestral healing with herbs practices for your own healing process, I'm creating a course where I give instructions on and guide meditations and ceremonies, and give various other practices and processes that you can access as a Womb-Centered Healing Temple member, paid member. So you can pay a monthly contribution to the temple to become a member, anywhere from $9 a month, or if you want more one-to-one support from me in the process, you can pay higher amounts. So if you're interested in becoming a temple member and receiving access to this course, which one is this? Ancestral Healing with Herbs, and then all future courses, I'll be creating womb-centered yoga and other movement meditation practices soon. I'll be creating womb steaming, specific womb steaming healing courses for healing specific womb ailments soon, and as well as the summits. You get ongoing access when I have guest speaker summits, and all the courses that I've already created. There's already a Root Well womb-centered yoga course there. There's already a womb steaming course, awakening, inner goddess awakening, womb goddess awakening. That's the name of the course. And there's a writing from the womb intro course that's there as well. So becoming a paid member gives you ongoing access to all previous courses that have been created, courses that are being created now, like this Ancestral Healing with Herbs course, and all future courses as long as you stay a member. So reach out to me if you have any questions about the membership program, or if you'd like to sign up. If you haven't done it already, there's a 1-month free trial where you get to check it out, learn how it works, and then decide what level of membership you'd like to join. So yeah, I'd love to, and I'm gonna stop the recording here and thank those who are watching the recording for doing so, and welcome your questions in the Mighty Networks group, which is where the recording will be posted, the replay. Those of you who are on here live, you'll get an opportunity to ask me any questions here in the next few minutes after we stop the recording. So that's all for now for our webinar. I hope this was inspiring and helpful to you, and I look forward to talking with you soon.